Ukraine's Spiderweb operation marked its largest and most successful assault on Russia thus far, reportedly inflicting around 7 billion in damage and decimating a significant portion of Russia's bomber fleet. Russia is still reeling from the blow, yet Ukraine shows no signs of slowing down. It's sustaining relentless pressure, refusing to grant Vladimir Putin even a moment's reprieve. In fact, the Ukrainian armed forces recently executed another devastating drone raid, dubbed Spiderweb 2.0, sparking widespread alarm among Russian analysts who now fear what might follow. Here's how that strike unfolded. On Saturday, June 7th, a Russian locomotive rumbled down the tracks, hauling a convoy of tanks, armored vehicles, and additional military material. Russia heavily relies on these rail convoys to sustain and supply its war machine. Since the invasion began, Russia has rushed to build new rail lines to streamline shipments of ammunition, fuel, and food. But this particular train never reached its destination. Unknown to Russian forces, Ukraine had secretly stashed a fleet of drones inside select railway containers. As the train rolled on, the container hatches opened, unleashing the drones, which then swooped in to devastate the convoy. This tactic mirrored the original Spiderweb attack, where drones were hidden inside trucks and driven to key Russian air bases. Once in place, container tops opened and dozens of drones deployed, destroying and damaging a substantial number of Russian bombers parked there. Reports say the first Spiderweb strike wiped out up to one-third of Russia's bomber fleet in just one day, a feat that took 18 months to plan. The details of how Ukraine managed to smuggle drones aboard the train remain unclear, but speak to extraordinary intelligence, strategy, and stealth. These militarized supply trains are typically heavily guarded, under camera surveillance, protected by security personnel, and monitored at critical nodes like stations, ports, and bases. Pulling off such an infiltration and release of drones mid-transit is nothing short of remarkable. Ukraine also had to identify the exact train carrying both military hardware and grain containers, and then engineer a method to safely conceal and remotely deploy its drones at precisely the right moment. Like Operation Spiderweb, this strike showcases Ukrainian ingenuity against overwhelming odds. Though operational specifics are scarce, confirmation has come from sources on both sides. If the reports hold true, the strike was devastatingly effective. On June 7th, the Defense Forces of Southern Ukraine posted on Telegram, the Defense Forces of Southern Ukraine struck a locomotive carrying enemy equipment. The enemy lost 13 tanks and over 100 armored and automotive units. Meanwhile, American independent war correspondent Igor Shushko confirmed on X that Ukrainian drones had emerged from grain car hatches and destroyed 13 Russian tanks, along with more than 100 armored vehicles being transported in occupied southern Ukraine. Other outlets suggest the losses were even grimmer. Beyond the tanks and armored vehicles, 7 artillery pieces and 10 fuel wagons, transporting between 158,000 and 172,000 gallons, may also have been destroyed. Of course, claims from Ukrainian or affiliated sources might be inflated, but even pro-Kremlin voices are sounding the alarm. One notorious blogger reportedly wrote, "There is no point in remaining silent anymore. The enemy destroyed a locomotive with tanks and dozens of armored vehicles. At some point, hatches through which grain is poured began to fly off. It was through them that drones flew out and attacked the equipment. Operation Spiderweb 2.0, someone must answer for this." Why is this significant? Russian bloggers and analysts are overwhelmingly pro-Kremlin, often downplaying setbacks or exaggerating victories. In some cases, Russian law criminalizes criticism of the government or military. Yet here we see pro-Russia commentators openly denouncing the military's failure, indicating cracks even among staunch supporters. If those previously loyal voices are now speaking out, what might that signal for Putin's Kremlin? This shift worries Kiev. While some Russians may still support the war, growing awareness of its grim reality could erode Putin's carefully crafted image as a strong, resolute leader. Despite his efforts, the conflict is dragging on far longer than anticipated, and Ukraine continues mounting lethal raids deep inside Russia, chipping away at its war apparatus. If these new reports hold true, this latest strike deals a serious blow. A recent study by the Center for Strategic and International Studies catalogued massive Russian equipment losses since January 2024, 1,149 armored fighting vehicles, 3,098 infantry fighting vehicles, 300 self-propelled artillery units, and 1,865 tanks, with Russian losses greatly outpacing Ukrainian ones, with ratios ranging from 5.1 to 2.1 in Ukraine's favor. To that tally, Spiderweb 2.0 contributes an additional 13 tanks and over 100 armored vehicles, evidence that despite its might, Russia is struggling to make meaningful gains. In some sectors, they advance a mere 50 meters per day, losing both heavy material and personnel. Russian death tolls may near 1 million, including 250,000 fatalities and hundreds of thousands of wounded. Continued strikes will only compound their losses and degrade Putin's standing further. There's every reason to believe the drone campaign will persist. Ukraine has moved from defense to offense, striking deep into Russian territory on multiple fronts. The largest operation was the original Spiderweb, over 100 drones against 4 Russian air bases, including the BAWLER airbase over 2,000 miles from Ukraine's border, surprising the world and crippling Tu-160, Tu-22, and Tu-95 bombers. Other recent strikes include an assault on the Kerch Bridge using underwater explosives, possibly deployed by underwater drones, stoking fears that Ukraine could soon hit Russian naval installations or even nuclear submarines. And elsewhere in Russia, Ukraine struck the Crystal Oil depot in Engels and the Progress missile factory in Michurinsk, igniting massive fires and destroying critical missile control systems. Drones are the common denominator in all these operations. Russia has ramped up its own drone production, buying Iranian Shaheeds and developing new facilities, seeing drone strike numbers jump from about 2,600 in 2022 to perhaps 13,800 in 2024, with even more anticipated in 2025. For Ukraine, around 70% of combat casualties are now caused by drone attacks, terrorizing soldiers and civilians alike. Russia is responding by innovating, adding AI, autonomous systems, and extensive operator training to their unmanned arsenal. But Ukraine has proven it can fight back in kind. Ukraine's drones are cheap and easy to transport, yet capable of delivering disproportionate damage at low cost. Spiderweb drones reportedly cost around $2,000 each, yet wreaked billions in damage. Crucially, this gives Kyiv an unprecedented capability to strike deep within Russia, far beyond the front lines. Ukraine's message is clear: nowhere in Russia is truly safe. Even assets thought secure in the hinterland may already be hosting concealed drones, ready to attack without warning. It's not yet known which drone types were used in Spiderweb 2.0, though they were likely similar to those in the original operation: basic, inexpensive, yet devastatingly effective. And if such modest drones can inflict this level of destruction, one can only imagine what Ukraine might achieve with advanced systems like its Toloka TLK-150, TLK-400, and TLK-1000 underwater drones. The smallest TLK-150 is about 8 ft long, with a 60-mile range and a 110-pound payload. The gargantuan TLK-1000 spans nearly 40 ft, travels over 200 miles, and can carry 11,000 pounds, enough to neutralize multiple targets in a single strike. Russian analysts are already warning of possible Ukrainian strikes on naval hubs like Vladivostok, home to nuclear submarines. Ukraine is also deploying sea-based drones like the Magura VE-7, a 24 ft unmanned craft capable of launching anti-aircraft missiles. The Ukrainian military reported that the Magura VE-7 downed 2 Russian Su-30 fighters last month, demonstrating Ukraine's commitment to drone innovation for current and future conflict scenarios. Together, these drone operations target key logistical and military infrastructure across Russia: oil refineries, factories, airfields, railways, bridges. Ukraine clearly aims to wear Russia down by striking its support networks. With far fewer soldiers, 900,000 versus Russia's 1.3 million, and vastly fewer armored vehicles, Ukraine 114 tanks versus Russia's 5,750, 87,920 armored vehicles versus 130,000 plus, Ukraine is engaged in a modern David versus Goliath. But like that biblical story, Ukraine's strategic precision, choosing targets carefully, planning meticulously, executing flawlessly, has enabled repeated major blows. It happened with Spiderweb, and now again with Spiderweb 2.0. As for Spiderweb 3.0, speculation is rife. Rumors suggest Ukraine may use its underwater drone fleet to strike at Russian ports or naval bases, perhaps targeting the Pacific Fleet's destroyers and corvettes in the Far East.